Hey, everybody, welcome to Cars with Cocktails, a show where Charles and I drink stuff and talk about car stuff. Today, we're joined by a guest, Ben from Unplugged Performance. He does a lot of Tesla EV stuff and is based out of California. So, Ben, welcome. And Ben's going to be hanging out talking a little bit about what he's done there. So, Ben, why don't you give us an idea of a little bit what you guys do at Unplugged?
Sure. Well, first of all, nice to meet you both, and yeah, pleasure to be here. For Unplugged, what we do is basically try to maximize what a Tesla can be. In Tesla language, turn it up to 11, and in particular, it's an interesting challenge. We were the first to modify Teslas back in 2013, and at the time it wasn't like it is now, where now they have the Model S Plaid that's 0 to 60 in 1.99 and does 200 miles an hour. But back then, people were still on the fence a lot more about EVs being a car enthusiast car and a performance owner's kind of car. Now Tesla's come a long way, but there's still territory and areas that we are trying to push into that people aren't used to yet. So for example, we run track day events called Tesla Corsa, where we're basically encouraging Tesla owners to go to the track, and we're putting down some really fast lap times at Laguna Seca, Button Willow, the Nürburgring, and so on. And yeah, from our side, we basically started in 2013 to kind of create an aftermarket and to create an enthusiast market for Tesla ownership. And since then, we've developed a really wide range of products and complete cars that span the entire Tesla lineup: Model 3, Model S, X, Y, soon to be Cybertruck and Roadster. And it was an interesting challenge in particular because it's a new category. My background, for 21 years, I've been in the aftermarket modifying cars, and it's in some ways a new roadmap and a lot to kind of figure out along the way. But it's been a wild ride. It's been a lot of fun.
What's your primary demographic of customer owner or customer for, like, what model is it? Model 3 owners predominantly?
It's all over the place. Tesla's interesting. When my background was in Japanese cars, and it's very easy to define a Nissan GTR owner, or easier to define. There's still some outliers, but you can kind of get a feel for the type of person who will buy a Nissan GTR. For Tesla, there's all types. And there's all types even for the same car. There's all types from Model 3. There's all types from Model S. So it's really hard to kind of classify what the customer is in general. But our kind of customer is a type of person who probably had an equivalent of like an Audi S or BMW M or Mercedes AMG, or on the higher level, an Aston Martin or Lamborghini or Ferrari or Nissan GTR. And that varies car by car. Our Model S customers, we have some pretty high-end packages for that, but we also have some entry-level stuff for 3 and Y. So it's not really a one-size-fits-all. The main thing is the same as it's always been for all these years I've been doing this. People always want to make their cars better and make them more personal for themselves. So that answer can mean different things, whether you're buying an entry-level Model 3 for 38 grand, or whether you're buying a Model S Plaid for 120 grand.
So Ben, can you walk us through like what that looks like? So pretend I just got my new Tesla, whatever, you pick the model. What is someone when they're looking to modify their car, what are they trying to do? So like, I think of it from a VW Audi aspect. Okay, we buy this new GTI or this new S4, and what do we want? Of course, we want it to be a little bit faster. We obviously want to look at looks and performance and maybe some very slight customization. How does that compare to what a Tesla owner is going to be looking at?
Yeah, I mean, there's two sides of the equation. One side is the customer side, which is what are they trying to enhance or fix? And the other side is our side in terms of development. From a development standpoint, I have kind of a fairly strong bias in terms of philosophy. My goal is never to make the car something that it isn't, just to figure out what it is and to make it better at what it does. I feel like some tuners will go against the grain and try to transform something into something totally different, and there's a market for that. But I look at basically what's left on the table when they manufacture the car, and how can I go further with it in terms of materials or technology, whatever it may be. So there's two sides of the equation. So from the customer side, there are some customers that daily drive the car and want a soft, smooth suspension. We have some of them, but mostly our customers are people that want to go faster in the canyons, on the racetrack, and want to basically challenge some of the dominant cars in those categories. So we're very excited to be kind of getting equivalent lap times now with tuned Model 3s that are running up against 911 GT3s around Buttonwillow. So that's kind of an interesting category for us. We have customers that want to track prep their car but still daily drive it. But there's all shapes and sizes and types. The main thing is to make the car better, and that can range from comfort to racing to anything in between.
Now, I think the interesting thing about you is you got into this. You mentioned briefly about being into different markets and GTR. You mentioned to me previously that you had a background more in the JDM world. So what was your entry into the aftermarket, however long ago that was, like?
So yeah, I was in college and I studied in Tokyo for a summer and was really into Japanese car tuning and culture. And when I came back to the States, I was studying entrepreneurship and wanted to basically run a business while I was learning about running a business. So I started importing from Japan. This is in the beginning of the year 2000, just because I thought Japanese car tuning was really cool and it wasn't really well understood back then. So that was my mission early on, was basically to export this culture and hobby that I love that wasn't really widely accessible or understood, and to bring it to people in a different language. So we brought a lot of Japanese car tuners that didn't know how to export, didn't speak English, were uncomfortable with everything from warranty and support to shipping. And we brought them to North America. And that business is called Bulletproof Automotive, which I still run to this date. And over the years that evolved, markets evolve and cars enter and leave. So we started as a specialist in the Honda S2000. And then over time, that moved to Nissan Zs and Evos and WRX STIs and GTRs. And basically, we've been doing that for 21 years now. In the beginning, it was mostly educational. A lot of it was just trying to even explain this stuff existed, because it was before you could find everything on the internet. Back then, I had to go to Japanese bookstores and find stuff. Yeah. We used to distribute these books called Hyperrev, which is they call it like a Japanese car Bible. It's basically, they have a book for each car, and it's like hundreds of pages of every single tuning part you can buy for the car. So we used to basically distribute those books as a way to educate people on what was possible. And then we'd ship them the book and then say, hey, whatever you see, we can translate the page for you and quote you on the part, and we can bring it over from Japan. And we just tried to open up that world of stuff that people just didn't know existed. And all this, over time changed. In the beginning, it was, no one really knew about aero parts. Back in the day, it was just, power mods and wheels. But aerodynamics became a big factor for Japanese car tuning. And then it was drifting. We were involved in the early days of drifting when that came over to the US. And everything evolves in stages, and we've kind of seen these different cycles, whether it's forms of motorsport going up and down in popularity, or whether it's cars going up and down in popularity, or whether it's just materials. We spend a lot of time with carbon fiber and still do, and there's a wide range of evolution just on carbon fiber alone over these years. Anyway, long story short, 2013 we bought an office next to Tesla and SpaceX in Hawthorne, which is where we are now. And we were modifying some very high horsepower GTRs, and a couple of the guys from Tesla knocked on our door and liked the stuff we were doing. And we kind of built a friendly relationship, and they've asked me what I thought about modifying Teslas. And at the time, I wasn't too sure how to answer that. But long story short, I bought a Model S, realized that was the future, and that I wanted to figure out how to lead things forward. And I think now it's a very positive conversation, but if I'm honest about it, back then I was quite scared. When I got the Model S, I realized I had this vision that electric cars were going to take over, and that there was nothing that would be competitive in the gasoline car category, just because you can't have more torque or faster throttle response or shift faster than never shifting. All these things that the aftermarket's always pushing on, whether it's the classic argument of forced induction or what's better, turbo or supercharger or NA. All this stuff to me became irrelevant once I realized you can make endless power instantaneously and never shift. So when I realized that, it was a very unpopular opinion in 2013 to feel like that was a category I wanted to get involved in. But I was afraid that, at that point I had spent 13 years of my life like dedicated to this hobby, and I was afraid the next generation just wouldn't care about cars anymore. So it became a little bit existential, where I just wanted to figure out, and I guess lean into this fear and figure out, is
How
there
to
really
make
something to be
EVs
worried
cool.
about here? Like, can this be cool? Like, is car culture dead? Is it going to exist? Are people going to want to do this 10, 20 years from now? And at the time, there wasn't clear answers. So we just started building it. And that was the beginning of it. And I was a little bit maybe over ambitious in the beginning. The first thing we did was decide we're going to do everything ourselves from beginning to end in-house. So the first guy we hired was from Ferrari's Formula One team in Italy, and the second guy we hired was from aerospace background, Washington, from Boeing. And we started building a composites factory in-house, and we started shaping all the parts from scratch and making our own tooling and making our own carbon fiber parts. And we just like thought we could just do everything. And that wasn't the right answer for scale, but that was how it started, was basically, rebuilding the aftermarket in our own minds of what it could be for this platform. We've had a lot of lessons learned over that time, and we're still learning every day. But yeah, it's been 7 years now trying to answer that question of, can electric cars be cool? Like, is there a new tuning enthusiast that can enter into the market that's never modified a car before, that wants to modify an electric car? What is that experience like? Can these cars be fun on the track? Can they do all the things that cars we're used to do? And, just understanding it. And that's taken different forms. Like now it's pretty much, I just challenge our business to conquer people who don't like EVs. Like, that's kind of the fun thing, is to find someone who just hates EVs and then to open their eyes to it. Because when you do that, you kind of feel like, okay, mission's accomplished. Like, even someone who thinks it's super uncool actually can really enjoy the driving experience. So we had that recently with Matt Farah. That was a pretty fun one that happened last week. And one by one, we kind of just find people that, are on the fence or not really sure about it, and try to just show them that, if everything goes electric, which that's debatable, but if it does, it can still be fun. Like, this car culture thing is not going to end with gasoline.
That's cool. And so what when with Matt, what was the thing that you did that you feel like kind of turned it around?
I wish I could say firsthand. I really wanted to be there for filming, but just had my first child, so I've been away, so I wasn't there on set. So it's all third hand through my team who was there. But I already knew the strategy early on, which is basically the guy just needs a really good driver's car, and we tune these cars to be really, really fast in the canyons, and they have a lot of natural advantages. But then we kind of play those advantages and make them stronger. So for me, it played the course the exact way that I expected. We got him a really, really fast, capable canyon car, and he was blown away by the way it handled, the way the braking was, and just the overall dynamics of these cars in the canyons are crazy. If you saw what we did last year at Pikes Peak, for example, one of the things that came out of that was our driver, Randy Popst, said that our Model 3 was one of the best handling cars he's ever driven. He's driven every car under the sun. So I think we had confidence in the recipe, knowing what a good handling car and a good setup would be for a Model 3. And it's just a matter of, when you have that recipe, it doesn't matter who it is, whether they think they like the car or not, you let them drive it, and it's going to do things that other cars just can't do. And that's what happened. And he said the car was insanely fast and handled really well. And afterwards, he put something on Twitter about the handling of it, how great it was. So I think his impression was improved. Which is great, because before that, I saw him and Joe Rogan talking about us on Rogan's podcast, and Matt was just not feeling it. Like, Joe Rogan was trying to explain to Matt, like, what we're doing is cool. I was watching Matt be like, nah, I'm not feeling it.
What car was it that was it a Model 3?
Joe Rogan's got a thing for our Model S that we do. We call it the S Apex. It's a full carbon wide body Model S with, everything just as nice as you can make it, full custom interior, and just carbon ceramic big brake kit, 21 by 11.5 wheels with 325 tires, just a lot of grip, a lot of power, a lot of luxury, a lot of everything. So Matt's into that, or sorry, I said Joe's into that. He's brought it up a couple times on his podcast, but he brought it up to Matt, and Matt was just.
No. Is that the car that he drove? Did he drive a Model S?
No. So that's the thing, and that's what you were saying before. Like, you have to know your customer. Like, I know Matt Farah is not going to want to drive a heavy bloated cruiser. He's going to want to drive a nimble canyon car. So we got him a really well-tuned Model 3. We call it our Ascension R, which is, we're offering them also as complete cars. So we have basically a brand new complete car program, and we got him one of those to drive, which is just super responsive, really high grip, really fast, and just built for canyons. And that's the right match. He might also like the Model S, but the Model S is just a heavier car. There's no way around the weight and dynamics of it.
Yeah, it makes sense. So modifying EVs, I guess for me, I don't know. I don't really know exactly about your business. You guys are improving acceleration, performance, that type of stuff?
Yeah. So the business in a nutshell is, when we started, we realized that there was not an AMG for Tesla, and that Tesla has no interest in creating something like that, because their business model is to make cars as efficiently and as fast as they can. And there's always going to be an audience for people that want something that's inefficiently made, customized with many options. And over time, we've seen this theory play true, where now if you want a Tesla, there's like 4 or 5 colors and that's it. And there's like almost no options. So we wanted to basically create complete cars from the beginning that, factor in suspension, braking, wheels, aerodynamics, interior, everything that you would get from an AMG or from that category of car. The challenge in doing that is that it costs a lot of money to develop so many parts across an entire car and to assemble something. So what we did is basically built that part by part. So first we made wheels with BBS, and then we launched aero parts of our own, and then we did suspension and so on. Now we're at a point where we have basically all the parts to build a car. We have our aero parts are all CFD developed, so they actually, make intelligent downforce without sacrificing drag. Our suspension is by the best in the world. Our brakes, everything we do is kind of the best in the world category, and customers can buy them part by part, or they can buy a complete car from us that has everything. And that's really our business model, is basically covering the car in what I would say is a holistic way, where we're not just doing one thing, we're doing everything in unison. For anyone that knows Japanese car tuning, is similar to like what Minds does, where Minds talks about balance of a car, versus the US style of tuning, which is just like, give it 1 million horsepower and give it big fat tires and then go rip up the street. Like, Japanese is much more nuanced for tuning in some cases. And I say we're somewhere in the middle. But that being said, there's challenges too, because we're close with Tesla. There are things that we won't do. For example, one of the age-old battles that we always hear is, oh, you're not tuning cars if you don't add power, or the car can't go faster if you don't add horsepower. And this is a challenge for us, because we can't bolt on a turbo or put on a catback exhaust. Like, these things don't exist for electric cars. So on the one hand, yeah, we could jailbreak the car, or whatever the equivalent would be of like a Motec, or a standalone engine management. But if we get into that category of manipulating the car in that way, it produces a big risk for Tesla and also for their customers. Warranties instantly void, and Tesla starts building distrust around the aftermarket because people are manipulating the car and then trying to hide it. So there's areas that we don't do, in particular, anything that manipulates the software with the car, which on these cars is really, really deeply integrated. And, other cars, you can screw with them a bit and get away with it, but the car is like in the cloud all the time. It has a permanent phone signal, so they see what you're doing all the time, and it's just not worth, in our opinion, doing that unless it's a pure race car.
Yeah.
But that being said, if you see our lap times on the track, they're way, way, way faster modified. You don't need to add power to make a car go fast. You can get speed a lot of other ways.
Yeah, well, obviously, yeah. That's something that I'm always interested to see, because, we obviously, Charles and I are in the VW space, and as VW is approaching more into the aftermarket, I would say the clear place where they are, I want to say in last place, but in very far behind Tesla, is performance acceleration. Like, if you look at the Elon Musk's philosophy on performance, I think the biggest criticism he has of most other EV cars is that they're slow. And because they design them to be kind of slow and boring and whatever. And that's probably the biggest detraction for most EVs is people drive them and is like, oh, this thing's a boring old, snooze of a car. If you're not driving, even the basic Teslas have decent acceleration.
Yeah, we're in a weird time as car enthusiasts because there's this thing is happening right now where there's an abundance of everything. Electric cars are just making everything in abundance, where numbers are making less and less sense in terms of what you can do with them. Like, for example, the new Model S that they're shipping next month has 1,000 horsepower, and the one after that will have even more. In the Roadster, no one even knows what that's going to have. But I think the point is, and this is where the aftermarket is getting strange, we're reaching a point, and it might be a year or 2 or 3, where no one's going to care like how much power a car has or how fast it goes.
It's irrelevant. Yeah.
Because you're going to have more than you could ever use. And like, these are the old ways of thinking. Like, the old way of thinking about electric cars was talking about range, because in the beginning there was range anxiety. And if you had 200 miles range, you had to plan a trip a certain kind of way. But with all these metrics that we measure what makes cars good or bad, at a certain point, the numbers become silly and they don't matter. Like, at a certain point, more than, let's say, 500 miles of range or 1,000 miles of range, no one cares. More than 250 miles an hour top speed, maybe no one cares. More than 2,000 horsepower, maybe no one cares. And what's weird about electric cars and what's weird about this technology is that these things are progressing so fast that we're reaching a point very soon where we're going to be in this category for a lot of these numbers that we're used to dealing with. 0 to 60 times, in the 90s when I was starting, early 2000s, if you were less than 4 seconds, you were unbelievably fast. And now the slowest Model S is, I think, like 2.9 or something, 0 to 60. That's the entry level one now.
Which is for most people at home, that's obnoxiously fast.
Nobody needs that. So we're kind of at this point where, like, the slowest version of the car is faster than tuner cars that people used to spend a lot of money to tune. And that just begs the question of, like, we're reaching this territory where the numbers are just all silly. Like, we're getting there. We're not there yet, but we're probably a year away.
So knowing things like that, and knowing that we're going to hit sort of these benchmark horsepower range numbers, what are some things that you're looking at to, I don't want to say stay relevant, but stay attractive as an aftermarket company? So, like, if I buy this whatever model Tesla that's got 1,000 horsepower and 0 to 60 in 1.5 seconds, like, what else is there to modify? Because I'm already going stupid fast.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a lot of it comes down to perspective. I was one that was very interested in a lot of forms of motorsports, but I was never that interested in drag racing. So to me, my own personal biases are that straight line acceleration isn't that exciting. And yeah, I wouldn't really be that interested in modifying a Tesla for drag racing, because I think it already has the recipe besides changing the tires out. But in terms of handling, there's a lot you can do. I mean, the nature with all of these cars are that they build them in mass production for the average driver, and the average driver doesn't want anything that is out of the standard, I guess, range of use case. So, for example, they're building these cars for cold weather climates. They're building these cars for, like, our parents and grandparents to drive. They're not differentiating them with, what you would expect as a car enthusiast. You're not getting the car with, cup 2 tires from the factory. You're not getting the car with carbon ceramic brakes. You're not getting the car with adjustable suspension where you can have full control over camber, caster, and tow, and running. The car we gave Nat to drive had 315 wide tires, front and rear, and they were Yokohama Advan AO52s, which are really grippy. They're not giving you race brakes. The brake compounds are meant to be quiet and dust free. So there's always going to be things that they're giving from the factory that are going to be geared towards the mainstream person. Another one's range. They're not giving as much downforce, and some of these cars are producing front lift from the factory because it's just more efficient to go further. But if you want to drive your car in the canyons, you want different suspension, you want more control over that, you want different tires, you don't care about range as much, you want more downforce, you want better, grippier seats, you want more Alcantara on the interior, you want more color choices for the exterior. There's an infinite number of things you can still do. Power is just one of like 50.
Hold on, back up. So you're saying that you can do more to a car other than just give it more horsepower?
That's not allowed to say in America. We're in
My
America right
mind
now.
is
It's
blown.
I don't buy it. I don't buy it at all.
You know what I love you said about the car being built for the masses. And I think that's where oftentimes enthusiasts, especially, I don't want to say young enthusiasts, but like young enthusiasts, maybe not necessarily in age, but often in age, but young in their automotive enthusiast journey, they get their head screwed on a little bit sideways and forget that like 99% of the cars that you buy are not built for enthusiasts, right? Even if it's more of an enthusiastic car, like a GTI over a Golf or an A4 versus an S4, it's still built for like Sally Soccer Mom. And she doesn't want to hear that raspy ass exhaust. She doesn't want to hear the sucky noises from the intake. She wants to get it in and drive. And that's what she's interested in. And my point with this is that so many enthusiasts are freaked out about EV and like, oh, they're going to ruin the car community. Well, if you let it, but you mentioned suspension, you mentioned aero, you mentioned seats, you mentioned color, right? All the brakes, all the other things that we as enthusiasts are really into, there's still going to be an option. You just don't necessarily need to add another 20% horsepower because you're at 1,000 or 1,200 or whatever you said the car was. This is mind-bogglingly insane. You're never going to be able to take full advantage of that kind of number on a public road. At least you probably shouldn't be anyway.
I want to add one thing to what you said, by the way, because I think that there's a lot of misconceptions. I thought you were going to go a different direction, but I'll go the direction that is, to me, an interesting conversation. These days, and when I said these days, I mean probably the past 5 years, there's been a really, I think, strong focus in the enthusiast market of just like competition for the sake of competition's sake, in terms of like how long your mod list is, how much power you made on the dyno. Just everyone wants to like one up the other person.
We call that a
media.
Dick measuring contest.
Yes, that's exactly what we call it around here.
And here's the irony, and this is where I think this goes. In the GTR world that we're involved in, there's a sweet spot where, and this is my opinion, people can debate it, but the sweet spot for the R35 GTR is about 1,000 horsepower. 800 to 1,200 would be the range. We have a number of customers that always want 2,000 horsepower. And the problem with that, and I've driven these cars on public roads, is you can't use them.
Yeah.
They're undrivable because you first of all, the lag is bad. So it takes time to build boost. And then by the time you do, if you're doing a pull on the freeway and you're starting at 60 miles an hour, by the time you have boost, you're in jail. Like it's
right.
There's no place to open it up. And the challenge is, if you look at it, not from bragging rights, but from actual like number of seconds enjoying the car, I'd rather have more time with my foot down on the throttle enjoying it than like driving around with something that in theory could, but I can never use. And that kind of leads me to my own personal belief, which is that the most fun cars to drive from a car enthusiast standpoint are analog cars that are old. And I think the best car garage you could have, for me at least, is a Tesla with autopilot that you can drive every day. And then like a 70s, 80s, or 90s car with the manual transmission with no traction control. That's just all feeling and all inefficiency. And this is kind of the trade-off.
I love that. And I get mad hell for saying, like, I don't own cool cars in like a premier cool car level. I have some like, okay, cool Volkswagens. But one of my favorite cars to drive is my pretty much stock 99 Miata with RE71Rs on it. And it's light, it's fast. It's not fast. What am I talking about? It's 112 horsepower to the wheels, right?
And the Canyon is fast because you're never lifting.
And it's so fun. Like, it's so much fun. And I don't care if people call it a hairdresser car, which is the dumbest thing to call it. Because what hairdresser wants their hair messed up in a convertible? Maybe some, I don't know. But I totally love that. We forget how more interesting a slow car is to try and drive fast than a fast car is to drive slow. Like, by the time you're enjoying the drive of 1,000 horsepower car, you're at the next stoplight or you're in jail, which hopefully it's not the jail side. And I think part of that too is today, especially younger enthusiasts, never really experienced that, right? Every car they've ever modified or had has been a DSG or a car with traction control, or, I mean, geez, look, what's 10 years going to look like? You know, my daughter's 6. Her first car is going to have all the assist, or it's just going to drive her wherever she wants to go. And I think people are really missing out on that pure, you know, old 911, or, I mean, the Miata is such a fun, stupid car to own. And they were cheap as hell, but they're weirdly, stupidly going up in price. That I guess
can't build
makes
cars
sense.
like that anymore with homologation standards and crash testing and all the safety stuff. They just don't exist. I think those cars are going to keep going up. And I think this is the misconception: is you can't. Everyone wants to quantify in this dick measuring contest that you're describing. Everyone wants to quantify where they stand, and you can't quantify fun the same way you can brag about a dyno chart. But the fact is, like, these cars that are inherently inefficient, they're noisy, they're rattly, but they make you feel something, and that feeling is worth more than bragging rights, because that's the driving experience. And
You should ask Paul about his 84 Scirocco feeling, driving feeling.
So we, Charles and I, last week, we completed a video series that we were just working on, I bought a bone stock 84 Scirocco. We drove it from Atlanta to Florida, and at which point we swapped a VR6 engine into it and drove it back to Charlotte. And to say it was a shit show would be an understatement. How much of a shit show it was.
Sounds like one of those Top Gear episodes.
It was. We'll see how the video series comes out. It's just in its infancy as far as editing, but god damn it, it was a rough week.
Dude, the shit that went down on that car is unbelievable that nothing was staged. Like, unbelievable, all the dumb shit. But anyway, that's a topic for another day. But now when I hear analog cars, I think of
that 84 Scirocco it's pretty analog. So it would be analogous for the analog comparison. And I agree. I think, it's a really good, interesting point, because I think I hadn't really considered that, because we're not really much in the EV market, but it makes sense. I mean, when you're talking about a car like the Model S Plaid, that 1.90 to 60, I mean, I think most people, I've never driven a car, I don't think that's that fast. My S4 is reasonably fast. 0 to 60 is probably is in the low 3s, quarter mile. But like, when you think about a 1.90 to 60, you're talking about a quarter mile time that's in the 9s probably.
Yeah.
Out of the box, which honestly, obviously, yeah, it's funny enough, because you mentioned that you were involved in the Fast and the Furious, but like in that movie, they had that like stupid throwaway line, like, you owe me a 9-second car or whatever. Yeah. But like 9 seconds is fucking crazy for a car.
And now it's going into mass production on a heavy sedan, not even a sports car.
Right. It's not.
I mean, it is a sports car, but it doesn't look like one. It looks like a 7 Series or an S-Class. It's a big sedan.
If most people really knew what a 9-second quarter mile felt like, they would be blown away. Like, I can't say I've ever been in a car that I know of that had a 9-second quarter mile, but my car probably is in the low 11s with about 500-ish horsepower all-wheel drive, but like 9 seconds is really fast. And
you could probably injure your passenger if you didn't warn them and accelerate. Just the G-forces and damage to someone's organs. You could probably shake someone up pretty good.
9 seconds is not a joke. It's not something to be screwed around. And frankly, it's kind of crazy that Tesla is doing this with just general cars that just the general public can buy, because a 9-second car is a really fast car. And, I mean, what are the stipulations at most quarter mile tracks? And I'm not like a huge track guy either, but like they require cage on cars, I think at what, like 10s, I think.
Yeah, it probably will be banned at a lot of tracks because of that. That's an interesting point.
Yeah, it's like they require fully caged cars at legit quarter mile tracks where they have proper safety shit, and they're like, nope, if you get into the 10s, you need a full cage. And it's like,
talk about good PR though. I mean,
this asshole
sedan, you show up and they ban you.
Yeah, like, crazy.
Meanwhile, I just ordered that same car on the internet, and all I needed to do was show my insurance and my driver's license. It's
Right.
amazing. I love that.
Yeah, and you can pay with Bitcoin now too, or about to be, which is
Yeah.
a whole different bag of worms.
Oh God, my God.
Let
Yeah.
me
So
check my account here real quick.
yeah.
Maybe I got enough money.
Interesting. That's an interesting point though, because that was the one thing I felt like as we move more towards EV, autonomous, blah, 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 which, I think we're many years away of that really meeting real reality. But the future of car enthusiasm to me, let's talk about 30, 50 years down the road is like, you don't even get to drive a regular old car on the road. You have to drive on a track in your analog car because it's too stupid to go on the roads. Now,
yeah, I think if you play this thing the whole way through, we're in a scenario where in some respects the aftermarket shrinks, but in other respects you have a much more focused, non-compromising track culture. And I think that could be a mixed bag. A lot of for my business, a lot of stuff we've done have been basically at first a lot of daily driven cars, and then when you get to the higher price point category, a lot of weekend cars, someone's third or fourth car. But most of these cars are designed for street use, and when you remove the street use part of the equation, you could build a really, really nice track car because you're not trying to compromise. I think that's where we're going to end up, is there will hopefully be more of these track day resort kind of facilities where people are storing their cars there, and then they just go there and race them on the track, and then drive something autonomous on the street. And that's not a bad thing, so to say, although I really do like driving in the canyons. And I think that's the part I'm going to miss, is that implied in this whole thing is that at some point, and we're not talking 5 years, we're talking probably 20 years, but at some point when cars are all mass produced and autonomous, it'll be the equivalent of being a murderer to drive a car, because you're endangering people. In the same way that drunk driving exists now, it'll be that for anyone who has manual control over a car. I think we'll end up there at some point. It's quite a distance away. But when that time comes, track day culture is going to be epic. There's going to be racetracks and cars that are just kept there, and they're going to be insane.
Right. Anybody who's an enthusiast, even remotely, will be at least visiting, membership, blah blah blah, some version of that at those places. Yeah, I mean, I think most people probably mourn the death of the car in that way, probably, who are enthusiasts. I think it's certainly just a shift in a different direction. Ideally, I'd
actually prefer it to stay put where it is right now. I think we're in like the sweet spot of everything. And I was last year, I kind of had this thought when I was driving around the road. I think that like the diversification of like how many types of cars there are is amazing, and that's the part we're going to lose. Like, it's reaching a point where certain things are more efficient than others, and certain things are not going to get made anymore. Like just looking at it now, so you can have in Japanese terms, FR, MR, and RR layout, meaning front motor, mid rotor, or rear motor, and there's pros and cons and merits to all of this stuff. And then you can have all these different types of power, whether it's NA or supercharged or turbocharged. All of these things exist because there's like a good argument that makes for fun podcasts about the merits of which format's better, whether it's the Corvette going to rear engine, or whether, whatever it may be. There's an interesting conversation, but the problem that's going to occur is that some of these things are just less efficient than others. Like rear engine is always going to have worse cooling for the motor, and the handling dynamics change. But the bottom line is that when you go electric and all the power is on the bottom of the car, and you have infinite power and lower center of gravity, that's just faster. Like, there's no way around it. The fact is that it's faster on the track, and it's more efficient to have an infinite amount of power on the bottom of the car than to have 50-50 balance. That's just the right packaging. So what's happening is that all the stuff that we see that's like, oh, you point this out in the road, oh, that's cool to see this, to see that, all these different crazy shapes and sizes and things. The 70s cars were super fun to look at with all the wedge shapes. All of those things are becoming like more quantifiable, of like, this is an efficient shape for aerodynamics, this is an efficient shape for downforce. Like, we can quantify these things, and what's going to happen is that all of this diversity is going to converge into, here's the efficient package to do this and to do this and do this, and we're going to have like 5 choices instead of like 1,000 choices.
To be uniform blobs of cars on the road, basically.
Well, I mean, even for race cars, like if you look at the fastest race cars, like we've raced at Pikes Peak, if you look at that Volkswagen IDR, like
Mm.
there's no gasoline powered car that's going to mess with that. I mean, it's purpose built. And the thing with design of cars at that level is it's not designed by a designer. It's designed by CFD guys working on computers, you know, analyzing airflow and downforce and efficiency. And that's not new. Like we've had this happen for the past 15 years already, where things are becoming much more computer designed and efficient, and it makes them better cars to drive. But in the end, they all lead to one destination, which is what's the optimal way to do whatever you're going to do. And it's not that they're all boring. Like race cars will be really, really fast, faster than ever, but they'll be optimized for that. And each of these things are being optimized in a way that is, I think, like objective versus subjective. And this is the thing, like, and that's the beauty of old cars is, you know, in some ways, if you think about it like music, like if your favorite artist just made music based on what a computer algorithm said was the most popular way to make a song for their
Yeah, it'd be
audience,
shit.
it sucks.
It would be
Yeah.
shit. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nobody
but
would like
that's
it.
what's happening. Like they're designing and optimizing to the point where this variety, like people enjoy the inefficiency and the errors as much as they enjoy the successes. Like people enjoy the weird quirks as much as they enjoy things
Well,
working perfectly.
we don't know the errors are errors, right? It's like it feels right, but the problem is if you squeeze the shit out of the lemon, is eventually there's no more juice left, and you just have the end product.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that there's all kinds of ways to modify cars, and you know, maybe having me on, you think that I'm just like 100% EV and that's it, and everything else, forget it. But I really think that there's a sweet spot of our culture right now where we're kind of getting the best of all worlds. We're getting the best of technology with EVs, but you can still drive them in the canyons. They can still be really fun. And then when you get bored in traffic, you hit the stalk and it goes on autopilot and drives you to work doing nothing. But then also we can enjoy vintage cars and all the fun sounds and feelings and, you know, the excitement of you know, having a three pedal car versus right now these cars are one pedal where you don't even have a brake pedal in essence. Like the Tesla, I almost never touch the brake pedal, just lift off, gives so much braking that the taillights activate. So going back to a car where you can heel toe downshift is just a feeling that is great that we can experience that. And I think this is kind of the best time for car enthusiasts. I really do.
Interesting. And I didn't realize actually when we first talked that you were still running the Bulletproof. So you guys are still actively engaged with that. It sounds like you do a lot of GTR stuff. Is that your kind of the bread and butter of what they do there?
We ship containers from Japan every month. We bring over a decent amount of stuff for a variety of cars. GTRs we're probably still best known for. We support a lot of tuning of every kind of Japanese car, a lot of Evos, STIs, Zs. And that's, you know, that's my hobby and my history. I'm never letting that go. So that's definitely part of me. But at the same time, like that's in the rear view. I mean, that's the challenge right now. When I talk to Japanese car manufacturers, that's my challenge for them is how do you look forward instead of backward? And I feel like a lot of that culture is looking backward and idolizing cars like the 240Z, which is a classic recipe. And now you see the new 400Z, which is trying its best to be a 240Z all over again. And I think the old recipe is great, but the question is, where are we going and what's the next step forward? And I think Japan is struggling right now to break through on that category. And a lot of car manufacturers are.
I think Nissan is just trying to stay relevant, to be honest with you. That's their struggle. They're just trying to stay alive in the US.
Shame, it's a great brand. I love Nissans. But yeah, it's a challenge. You know, technology is moving so fast and it's easy to fall behind. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, VW obviously on our side, they've committed to EV heavy. They make the most snooziest EVs on the world, I think. They're fucking embarrassing when you compare them to Teslas. I mean, that's just the reality is when you look at a Volkswagen EV versus a Tesla, it's like, okay, it's a perfectly fine car. A design aesthetic is all opinion. If you could have whatever, but it's like you have the cheapest, shittiest Tesla versus any EV Volkswagen that's probably going to come out. I mean, even the Taycan, which was a good performing vehicle, but I think had some range issues and some whatever. But god damn it, the VW and Audi group is going to be pretty terrible, and that way they're going to produce some the ID stuff that's going to have a
They'll get it together. They have to. I mean,
0 to 60 of like 9 seconds or some shit like that, and it's going to just be embarrassing.
They're also not building and you, Paul, you know me very well, and I'm a very infrequent supporter of some of the choices Volkswagen Audi makes. Sometimes very vocal about that. They're not building that car to compete with Tesla, even if they say they are. They're full of shit. They're building that car so that someone buys that EV over a Prius or that EV over a Jetta gas car. Like the Jetta by and large is a boring fucking car. I mean, but that's what they're building for.
But the thing, I agree with you, but except for you have to remember, to me, price point wise, and I don't know Tesla very well, so Ben, you can probably share this. What's the cheapest Model 3 you can buy?
Oh, 37 grand.
Okay. So 37 grand, then you have all these like tax benefits, blah, 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 whatever. So maybe it ends up being like 31, 32 or something like that, right? Is that right?
Save a bunch of money and not paying for gas. So it ends up being cheaper than what you're paying up front. But
the no gas price is the obvious one, right? But then there's some federal tax credits that I think at some point are declining.
They come and go. I think they're coming back again. Okay.
Yeah. So anyway, let's just call it a $33,000 car. Sure. If you compete with a Model 3, what's the cheapest Model 3 single motor 0 to 60? Like 6 seconds?
Probably still a little faster. I'm guessing 5s. I never pay attention to the numbers for that, but it's not slow.
Yeah, 5 seconds 0 to 60 is a pretty quick car. Like that's
stock Golf R time.
Yeah, stock Golf R. Like that's a very solid 0 to 60 time. I think 99.9% of the public would be blown away with a 5 second 0 to 60 time. I think it's more than they could ever ask for, given their normal expectations. Volkswagen's going to come out with some.
Here's the key thing, and this is the part that anyone that drives a Tesla knows instinctively, but may not be obvious to you or to your listeners. I'm not sure.
All right.
What happens when you're driving any other car? And this is one of my experiences with the Model S when I first got it in 2013. I was driving 1,000 horsepower GTRs, and you have an experience where the classic experience, you're driving up to a light and you're wondering, am I going to make it or not before it turns red? In that scenario, or any scenario in which like the car has to respond to your input, any other car has to drop 2 gears, downshift, build RPM or boost, and then go. And the Tesla's already gone. It's already through. So just in terms of like driving around town, like if I see a light that's going to turn red, like it's a totally different experience in a Tesla as to whether you're going to go for that or not, because it's instant. And every other car is not. So 5 seconds is not equal between the two. It's totally different in terms of usability.
What I'm hearing is you're a responsible vehicle owner, and then you just hit the brakes and you slow down for a yellow light. That's what I'm hearing.
Except in inclement weather, when you're about to get assholed by the EV phone behind you, then you fucking punch it and go. Look, I think, this is obvious in the EV world for the next X years, right? If you want to call it 5 years, 7 years. I mean, of course, other manufacturers are going to catch up. They're going to, target the big player on the field in the EV world, but they're already so far behind that, despite the fact of having, millions of times more resource available to them, companies like Volkswagen, Audi, BMW is going to get there. All of them are going to get there, right? They're always going to struggle. And I mean, I don't ever see a place where Volkswagen makes a car that they truly build to compete with any Tesla top to bottom, right? They're going to allegedly fucking one day in 2137 build the ID bus, which will probably never happen because they've been stroking that trolley for the last 15 years.
2001, my friend. That's
20
years.
20 years,
20
obviously.
Years.
Which is just absolute horseshit. They're going to build boring EVs that are going to be mainstream. And that's cool.
But I looked it up. I can't find the goddamn 0 to 60 time because these fucking internet is not easy. These self-congratulatory, nothing makes me more mad, just to be clear, this is kind of a super weird tangent, than these fucking people who write these articles that all they want to do is stroke their dick about how many words they know instead of giving me the goddamn fucking information. I'd like to know. Go fuck yourself, the guy who writes the article.
Hey, I think now's a good time to talk about the drink of the day, because I think Paul might have been pounding them.
Go crazy there.
Okay. Curve here. Yeah.
So we're drinking whiskey. This was the choice of Ben. He is a whiskey connoisseur. He sent us a picture of his whiskey collection, which was holy shit, was crazy. Tonight, because in honor of Ben, I'm drinking the whiskey that Charles and I drank. Ben, this was a gift to me, some sort of special edition. And I'll be clear. We said this in the last episode where we drank this.
Bastardized that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I am not a whiskey connoisseur. I have no idea anything about this. This was gifted to me from somebody. And I looked it up. It appears to be a roughly $600 to $700 bottle of Jack Daniels. But I have no idea what the quality, like somebody who's a whiskey connoisseur might look at this and be like, this is a legitimate piece of shit. I 100% believe it could be true.
Peasant.
Yeah. I have no idea. So that's what I'm drinking tonight in honor of yours. It's called Jack Daniels 1981 gold medal whiskey. That's what I'm drinking. It's supposed to be expensive. It looks like it based on the internet, but I don't know. It could be crap as far as I know.
Who are your friends that are gifting whiskey like that? That's wild.
Do you know what that is?
I don't, but okay. I'm also not as good with bourbon as I am with Scotch or Japanese. So I know, of course, Jack Daniels, but not all these crazy priced ones.
Yeah. I have no idea. This was a gift from my mother-in-law. That was a re-gift. She was like, she doesn't know alcohol at all. She just said, somebody gave me this. They give probably pretty good gifts. You can have it.
Nice.
So that's why I have it.
Or for you.
Yeah. So what are you drinking this evening?
I brought a couple bottles into the room. I'm drinking Japanese right now, Yamazaki 18, which is just a classic. So I've had the good fortune of, through Bulletproof, going to Japan for 21 years and going there 2 or 3 times every year. And I used to, before COVID, when I actually could travel, I used to basically go there and then shop at duty free and bring bottles back every trip. And it worked out great, because now all this stuff, the prices went crazy and you can't get this stuff right now. Like these bottles that I used to buy for $50 or $100 are now $1,000+ a bottle.
Oh, yikes.
So
man,
I'm lucky I got in when I did. Yeah, I should have just, kept cars as a hobby and just made money buying whiskey.
It takes up a lot less space than parts, huh?
Well, that's the thing, actually. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I have so many bottles, is I was just like, collecting cars was a big pain in the ass, because you have to maintain them and store them, and there's a lot of responsibility. Whiskey is a lot easier for a hobby, so I'm into it.
Yeah. And Charles, are you also drinking whiskey?
I am. So I had to go to the ABC store because I don't have any whiskey here. So I tried to consult my alcohol advisor, who's my kid's sister, which is funny. And I got this Jefferson's Reserve, very old Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, very small batch. I guess it's good. I'm not a huge whiskey drinker. It's not disgusting, so I feel like
I got you guys both out of your comfort zone talking about EVs and drinking whiskey.
Yeah, that's really, right.
Pushing some new buttons here.
Yes. Yeah. To circle back, so the ID4, I looked it up before I went on my rant about how much I hate automotive journalists who are self-congratulatory about words that they know. ID4 is about 40 grand, which makes it more expensive than a Model 3.
Is it really going to be that much?
So, just to be clear, before we get into the we're not competing against Tesla thing.
Oh, I didn't say they might be trying to compete against Tesla, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a pretty uneven match.
So they probably get less range with less power for more money. So that's a pretty good combination for competition, is to deliver less of everything for more money, and then just be like, you know what, because we're good, that's why that's why you should.
It's been amazing having a front row seat to this EV war that Tesla waged on the world over these years, because it was just so ridiculous how it played out. You know, I got into this in 2013, although I did buy Tesla stock in 2012, and I've been following it closely ever since. And in the beginning, all these car manufacturers were just laughing at Tesla, and they were just like, oh, this is bullshit. This is never going to happen. And they just waited on the sidelines while Tesla just built and built and built and just kicked the living shit out of them. And then
it's too late.
Suddenly, like 2 years ago, everyone's like, oh, it's EVs now, obviously. Like all of a sudden, everyone's like taking every dollar they have, running around with their heads cut off, throwing money at this thing, trying to get in the game. But they're so far behind. It's like, it's laughable. They did it to themselves. Like it wasn't, I mean, I'm not Volkswagen. I'm just like one dude in LA with
Just
a small
guy.
business.
Yeah.
And for me, I'm like, this is fucking obvious. Like how could these car manufacturers sit on their hands and just get, you know, punched in the balls so hard by Tesla, and then all of a sudden, just in the past 2 years, realize, oh, we're going to go out of business if we don't start doing this. So let's take our whole bank account, throw it all at EVs, and then try to sell, you know, total dog shit to people for a while till we figure it out. And that's kind of what you're describing.
Yeah,
they'll get there.
Arrogance.
Here's the funniest thing. The funniest thing is, by the time they get there, Tesla will be somewhere way different. Like, for example, I had a conversation recently about future hypercars. And this is how ridiculous and absurd this gets. So hypercars are already going unbelievably fast, have huge amounts of downforce, huge amounts of power. And so you have to wonder, all right, you know, where do you go from here from like an engineering standpoint? How do you compete against Tesla? Anyone who's thinking about that now has to be thinking about making the cars fly, because Tesla is putting rocket thrusters on the Roadster, and they're going to make this thing float 6 feet in the air. Imagine parallel parking by flying into your spot. So now if you're a car manufacturer, 2,000 horsepower isn't even the goal anymore. Now you got to figure out, do we make these cars fly to compete? Like, what do we have to do to catch up to Tesla? That's how far ahead they are, is they're putting rocket thrusters in cars and making them fly, and everyone else is trying to figure out how to catch up to Tesla's cars from 2014. Like, that's how absurd this is right now.
I mean, I agree. I mean, battery tech, I mean, when you look at just about anything range wise against Tesla, it doesn't even come close. And it's a fucking joke, really. Everything against them. And I am not somebody who's heavy into the EV market, but I've looked into it as it becomes more kind of into our orbit and just the general automotive orbit. And it seems pretty obvious. I don't know if it's going to replace the market. I think we have a lot of issues around batteries at scale. It's going to be a serious fucking problem that seem to be a real future issue that the first world is going to have to deal with. But it's going to be a problem for sure. They're going to eat up a lot of the market. It makes sense for a lot of reasons. And yeah, I think everybody fell behind, and they're dum-dums.
Well, and not only kind of crazy though, which I don't know enough about, but I just started reading about it. Have you seen this Porsche e-fuel they're talking about? That's kind of interesting.
I have not.
I don't have enough knowledge on it to be an expert, but the essence of the story that I read is that they've created a fuel alternative that'll run on a combustion engine that is almost as clean and efficient as running an EV, and they're trying to basically market and sell it to keep gasoline-powered cars and older cars on the road. There's some patent technology they have, which is like a clean.
What is the what is it? Did they say what it's based on? It's completely synthetic.
I just saw it in the news yesterday, and I'm like, I feel like I'm late to the game, so someone probably knows a lot more than I do. But yeah, it's synthetic for sure. I'm not sure what it's based on, but the argument is they're trying to, and maybe to the same point, it's like they're looking at this saying, oh shit, we lost the EV race. Let's figure out how to make fuel clean so we can keep doing what we're doing. Maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but it's interesting if you come up with something like that works. I mean, they have to drive the cost way down, but that'd be entertaining if nothing else. I mean, the problem is, as a car enthusiast, like, this is where like all of the car enthusiast arguments kind of lead into two categories of conclusion. One is what's fun, and one is what's fastest. And what's fun might be a gasoline powered car that makes all kinds of noise and is inefficient. But what you can't argue is that a gasoline powered car is fastest, because the packaging of what you can do on an electric car and where you put the weight on the car is always going to be faster. So that's like where any of these arguments always go. And that's why the IDR is so fast at Pikes Peak, and why all the fastest cars in the future are going to be electric. Is there's no efficient place to put a gasoline burning motor in a car. Like it's never going to be packaged the right way. And as a result, you have a bunch of extra weight, you have a bunch of imbalance on the chassis, the rigidity of the car is not as good either. There's an infinite number of reasons why it's inefficient, and there's not really any good reason as to why it exists other than sounds cool, it's fun, and that's real. Like I totally get the enjoyment factor, which is why I'm all for older cars. But that's kind of where to me, that's the new argument of the old argument of, you know, forced induction versus NA. I think that's kind of the new argument of what's better and what are the pros and cons to argue about.
What I'm hearing is that my 84 Scirocco is inefficient, and I'm just not sure that it's true, because it's a 2001 engine in an 84 Scirocco.
You could just, at that exact moment, Paul, about 15 seconds ago, you could see the look on your face change to, I make really bad life choices.
I do.
And that was
terrible life choices. I don't know why I did that.
Look, there's always some excitement of wondering whether you're going to make it there or not when you drive somewhere. So hold on to that mystery and magic of life, where you never know if you're going to get where you're going, or if you have to.
The worst part about that is the most fucked up, terrifying part of the whole drive was the last 20 damn miles before we fucking got home, because holy shit, yes, people were bonkers. But to kind of cap on the whole EV and Tesla versus the world thing, not only is Tesla already 20 years, 15 years, 10 years ahead of everybody. What I love about Tesla is they don't need 800,000 signatures to change one little fucking thing. It's just like, yo, change that shit. Let's get it right. Where, you know, I can't speak to dealing with Toyota or some of the other manufacturers, but I assume they're at least in a similar vein. Like, for Volkswagen or Audi to change something because of a problem is like moving mountains, right?
Have you ever met a German? He's met Germans, it seems like.
Now add on 15 layers of fucking corporate bullshit that they all have to go through. And Ben, I think you nailed it. By the time that they're competing with the cars that are on the road today, and we're 15 years ahead everywhere else. So it's unfortunate that the old guard was so arrogant and stupid and thought, no way, this little car company out of California is going to do anything. And
there's a common phrase for this, which is disruption or disruptive technology. And the nature of disruption is not being afraid to be wrong. And I think that's the difference in car culture between the incumbents, you know, like a Volkswagen or a Honda, Toyota versus Tesla. Tesla's not afraid to take chances and iterate and move quickly. Right. And what you described is 100% right. Everyone else is looking for consensus and looking for sign-offs and covering their ass on every decision, and things don't move fast enough. But the other side is true, which is there's total chaos with Tesla all the time. Like, as a car tuner in that market, we can't rely on any kind of orderly fashion of rollouts. Like any other car, you know the model year, you know that car is going to stay the same for that year, and the next year is going to get a couple changes. Like Tesla, the car changes every week, and no one knows what's going on. You know, different parts are in different cars and different builds, and you get them and you bring them in the shop, and you're like, what the hell is this? I've never seen this before. No one's ever talked about this. And it moves so quickly that it's actually, in some ways, very challenging.
And by the way, you're across the street from Tesla, so and have relationships with them, right? So
yeah, and we're still caught off guard. I mean, it's so crazy how fast they move. But you know, if you're going to bet on someone to win versus lose this game, you're going to bet on the one that's changing their car and advancing it every week versus the one that's waiting for a year to make micro revisions. Like, it's obvious who's going to win.
Is always going to win. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's obvious. If you're going to bet money on a company, that's the one you bet on, is the one that moves fast. So the only competition Tesla's going to have are from companies that are like-minded, like Lucid and Rivian and these newer upstart companies, Neo and Byton and all these electric companies that are following that recipe. And in some respects, they're kind of copycat companies in terms of they watched Tesla do it, and then they felt it was de-risked enough and they had enough funding where they could do the same thing and try to do it better. But that works at least. Like at least this we know works, that you have to iterate quick and you have to advance technology quick. And the challenge is, these brands that we know and love, whether it's, you guys with VW Audi or whether it's me with Nissan, I don't know. Like, I don't know what they're going to do because they have to change their entire mentality. It's not just a matter of money or production throughput. Like they have to change the way they think and take risks because no one in Nissan's thinking, oh, how about making a car that flies? Like, or if they are, they're going to lose their job. Like, it's that simple. Like,
100%. Anybody
these
who
cultures
thinks,
don't allow this.
yeah,
Like, it's just not even possible to compete with someone willing to take risks when you can't even say something out loud without getting laughed out of the room. And that's what would happen in those cases.
Are you saying that Nikola is not a heavy competitor to Tesla?
Nikola is really good at raising money. I wish I had the skill set of Trevor Milton to make so much money for doing nothing. I work way too hard for way too little. Apparently, there's just a way to magically say something, have everyone write you checks. I haven't figured that out yet.
It's a fascinating use case for sure. Interesting thing in terms of battery tech. So I think I don't pay very close attention, but I did see a thing about the new batteries that Tesla is working on with that like multi-tab set in the rear. I don't think I didn't see it really talked about in anything that I saw about it. And again, to be clear, I don't pay super close attention, but it seemed pretty obvious to me that this would have a lot of performance benefits for output, because my understanding, at least, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not an engineer or somebody who knows shit about much, but it seemed as though the biggest issue that most EVs have is in terms of heat production during output, right? And that this would alleviate that a lot by having a lot more conductivity through a variety of passages. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a number of challenges and limiting factors depending on what you're doing with the car. For right now, for motorsports, thermal capacity in terms of just the general cooling system is a limiting factor where depending on the car and the platform you have, you can get, anywhere from like the old cars were like 2 minutes flat out and then they overheat and you get power cut. The newer cars are, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, depending on how you drive.
Which is why they had Nürburgring problems, right?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you look at it and it's just a matter of time before the technology gets there. And this is the current limit. But the crazier thing, I mean, that's going to get solved regardless with this. But the crazier thing in terms of the new battery cells, I mean, there's a number of things, but one of them is just energy density. It's like if you had a gasoline powered car and it was like a old big block V8 that made 200 horsepower, and then you compare it to like
direct injection,
one of like Koenigsegg's motors, which is like what, a 2 point something or 3.0 liter that makes like 1,000 plus horsepower. They're making way more power in a much smaller package with much less weight, and that always wins. And in this case, they've done it by simplifying where the batteries are also part of the structure and give the car more rigidity as well, taking weight out of the car. They're having as much power as you want to throw at it. And that's the recipe for more range than you could ever use, more power than you could ever use, better handling and lighter weight than you could ever use in most cases. Like, this is impossible to beat. And they're getting closer. Maybe in another year or less, we'll see it. And that's going to be game over. Like, at that point, all the numbers are laughable.
Am I correct in assuming that battery design allows them to alleviate a lot of those thermal issues that they deal with? Okay.
Yeah, the thermal is improving and totally changing when it comes to that. And that's also why, like, when they announced the Roadster a couple of years ago and they had these crazy numbers with the top speed and the range and everything,
it's probably through that design.
They need those batteries,
right?
Which is why you don't see Roadsters on the road, and also why you don't see Cybertrucks on the road and stuff like that. And once those batteries come out, yeah, I mean, the amount of range and power you can get is like just absurd. So it's coming, and then the challenge is, what does Volkswagen have for that? I'm not sure, but they better have something soon.
I mean, comparatively for general cars, again, you're talking about a vehicle like the ID4 that's going to launch. It's going to be, probably 0 to 60 in 8 seconds, something like that, 9 seconds, who knows? And compare it to a Model 3, or, you bring it up to a higher models, whatever, it's going to be laughable. It's going to be a joke. So,
here's the other crazy thing, by the way, is that same battery that does this is going to be keeping the heat on in homes in Texas that have no power, and is going to be supporting civilization as well, because they have this leverage of batteries with the power walls and solar roofs, battery storage components, and also on industrial scale, they're supporting governments in replacing, battery backup for cities. So that's another advantage when you're trying to be Volkswagen and compete against this. First, you got to build the battery, and then you have to justify the investment and the scale. And Tesla's brilliant how they're integrated in all these categories. They can leverage one technology across, 3-4 different product lines.
Yeah, everybody else is playing like 2-year-old version of checkers, and Tesla's playing 3D space chess or 4D space chess, maybe.
But in the meantime, have you guys driven a Tesla? Because that's important if you haven't, to check it out, because it is very, very different than most people expect.
I haven't driven one in quite some time. So I think I drove a much older Model S many years ago. But yeah, certainly performance-wise, they're amazing. I think I'm interested to see. Question for you, and maybe this is maybe not your area of expertise, but maybe a perspective. My concern has always been about raw materials when it comes to EV, is that we're going to run into concerns around that. I know, supposedly lithium is something that's fairly plentiful, blah, blah. There's a bunch of other things, but cobalt being one of them that is not. What's your general perspective on EV in terms of resources?
I'm certainly not an expert on it, or I can't talk about it in a level that's hyper intelligent. But there's a couple of things. One of Tesla's original founders, a guy by the name of J.B. Straubel, left Tesla and started, I believe it's called Redwood Recycling, and this whole business is basically working on recycling battery packs from old Teslas. So there's this ecosystem of what happens to the battery packs when cars are salvaged and crashed, and recycling materials. That's a whole industry that's being built because of the volume of Tesla. So I think we're seeing that. And that'll continue to grow. JB's a really smart guy, so I think he's ahead of the curve in terms of understanding the volume that you can recycle and repopulate in cars. In terms of raw materials, I know the new batteries, there was a long presentation that Elon had where they talked about everything from the chemistry to the method of manufacturing to the amount of water used in manufacturing is all changing. And they're doing that because they have to solve the problem you're describing. Like, in other words, if you're a Tesla and you're building this mega, $1 trillion business where you're going to change the world in terms of having batteries to support power storage and cars and other products, maybe they get into airplanes down the road, whatever it may be, batteries are the key piece of the puzzle for all of it. And it'd be pretty stupid to do that when you're dependent on a resource that's going to be gone. So I can't tell you with accuracy the exact solutions they have with the new battery cells, but I do know that they've built the model in a way that's much more efficient in terms of usage, and also much more vertically integrated in terms of being able to do a wider variety of it in-house, including even putting the factories near the mines for those types of resources, so that even the distance of moving raw materials to the factory is closer. So I can't tell you like at what point the raw materials run out or what technology they move to before it runs out, but I guarantee you that that is part of the equation, because otherwise they're driving right into a brick wall for the reasons you described. You don't want to build a business model where you just can't make product after a certain point in time because it's all gone. So I know it's solved for sure. I just can't tell you exactly how they solved it in terms of the material side.
Interesting. Yeah, I'm interested to see how that progresses over time with the EV market, because I think that's one of the things that is the biggest roadblock with all EVs, because they rely so heavily on cobalt. And I've seen some mention of some different battery types that don't revolve on that or don't rely on that, with like carbon-based batteries and some stuff like that. But I think that's very in its infancy, at least from my understanding. Now, again, I am not educated on the subject, just at a very cursory level at most.
Well, I think the nature of all of us being humans we're going to all become better educated because this technology is going to impact a lot of lives in ways that we haven't predicted yet. I think we're starting to see the beginning of it, but there's no way around it. Like energy storage is something that's going to be around for a long time to come. Right now, we've all dealt with it in our phones and our computers, but sooner or later, we're all going to deal with it more and more with, our homes and our cars and just things that we interact with.
Very interesting. Well, I guess, you know what, let's do this. I think this is a really interesting subject to end on. Ben was involved with the Fast and the Furious. Was it the very first movie?
A couple of them. So yeah, when I was 19, I guess, and I was just starting in the industry, I used to go to these car shows, and there was a casting for a movie called Redline, and I ended up being an extra in that movie and was there for 2 weeks of filming, and they renamed that to the Fast and the Furious. So I was in the first one on set as an extra, and around that time, I decided that I wanted to, do this hobby of mine as a business, as a lifestyle. So that's when I decided to really take Bulletproof seriously and to dedicate my life to the aftermarket. And then after that, I had no involvement with the second one. That was kind of a whole different crew and director and everything in Florida. So a lot of the people in the first one weren't involved in that. But I got back involved for Tokyo Drift, did a little bit of consulting with that and lined up a couple of things behind the scenes. And then for the fourth one, I built some cars for that one. Was involved with the picture car department for some of that. And then after that, I was out of it. It just, over time, that movie franchise became less about cars and more just like a Mission Impossible kind of franchise.
It was, as a car enthusiast, I'm sure we all felt kind of the same way. It's like, it became so less and less about cars to the point where you're like, okay, are we doing this still? Are
we in outer space yet?
The first one was so pure, though. The first one really was the scene at the time. I mean, just being on set with the guys there and everything, like everyone involved in that movie was living it. And I think that purity, made the franchise. And who knows? I mean, I guess Hollywood knows how to make their money, so maybe they figured that the purity of car culture doesn't pay the bills as much as popcorn flicks do. I would have loved to see a different reality where they kept making movies that were about the culture.
I don't know. I mean, the first one, I felt like it was such a good mix. I mean, I think the reality of the first one was it wasn't really like, it was clearly from real and car enthusiasts, but like most of the cars were, the Eclipse was what, like an automatic non-turbo Eclipse.
Oh, if you look at the details, forget.
You can't
look at the details.
Never look at the details. I also heard a rumor that Ben was actually the one that took the calipers off Mark personally. So you can thank him for that little bit of amazing humor from that first movie.
Yeah.
I will say one of the crazy things about life is that I filmed two scenes. One was the street race scene, and the other was Race Wars. But the street race scene was filmed on Prairie, which is a road right next to my office in Hawthorne. And at the time, I wasn't even living in California. So it's really weird how life works that I came out for filming from out of state. And then all these years later, I have an office that's like down the block from where that scene was. It's kind of
pretty cool.
Weird.
During the street race, the street race scene?
Yeah, that was so much fun to film. I would have paid to do that. They paid me, but I would have paid to do that because I don't know of any scenario where they block off the roads and they have police cars and helicopters chasing you, and you can be in a car chase and not get in trouble. It was so much fun to film that.
So you were in the car during that?
Yeah.
That scene.
Yeah, I was in the car during that. Yeah, they yell cops and everyone runs to their car and peels out and races down the street, and then look in the rear view and there's just chopper and cop cars chasing after you. You do the same scene over and over. We filmed from like, I don't know, it must have been like 7 o'clock at night till 7 in the morning.
What car were you driving when this scene was happening?
I was having too much fun. I actually drove off the camera because I was too far ahead. I was just like really into it. I was driving my Honda S2000. There's like a split second where you can see the white S2000 skirt off, and I'm in the front. But I think if I drove slower, I would have had more screen time. But I was just really into it.
As you get too young and jacked up, right?
Dude, it's so much fun. Like there's so much energy when you're in the middle of this thing and they're yelling cops and you're jumping in the car and going. You just get really in the moment. It was fun.
I love it. Well, I think it's a great time to end. Charles, do you have anything else you would like to ask?
I would just say, Ben, why don't you plug what you're doing and where folks can learn more about modifying their Tesla in super rad ways, or the bulletproof for their other modification needs.
Yeah, if you're into Japanese car tuning, Bulletproof Automotive, we were one of the early pioneers of that world, and we're still around bringing stuff over from Japan. You can check us out on Instagram, our website, wherever you want. Just look up Bulletproof Automotive. And then for Tesla, Unplugged Performance is the brand. And whether you're curious about what Teslas can do, you can look up some of the lap times that we've done on different tracks and some of the video out there, or check out what we did at Pikes Peak, which was pretty crazy last year. And if you're interested or you have a Tesla, check us out. We offer parts and complete cars and everything in between. It's unpluggedperformance.com. And then, we're on all social media channels as well.
I would also say probably don't expect your parts overnight from Japan. It might take more time than that. Or maybe not. I don't know.
Nobody wants to pay for overnight from Japan.
All right, Ben. Thanks so much. And that's an episode, guys.
Cool.
Until next week.